Yeah, resiliency. What it means to me is being willing to get knocked on my ass, if that word's okay on your podcast, and being willing to get up. That's resiliency.
I lost over $324,000 in a failed Amazon business that I tried to launch during COVID. And, I tell people that story and they look at me now and they ask, well, how'd you come back from that? How does anyone come back from anything? How do we recover from failure? And really the answer is it's resiliency. But is resiliency a trait or a skill? And if it's a skill, can we build a framework to understand how resiliency works so that we can all be more resilient? Because time is undefeated. And we know that if we don't give up, we're certainly going to succeed. This is the Resiliency Project, where we talk to successful entrepreneurs and business leaders about their biggest failure so that maybe we can all learn how to be a little more resilient. And my guest today is a phenomenal person. He's a new friend to me, potentially a new business partner. He's an amazing coach, entrepreneur, and the CEO of AMP Success. Matt Uhler, how are you?
I'm doing great, Nick. Thank you so much for having me here. I think the topic that you discuss is so important.
And I always say, Instagram is the highlight reel. And so I always start these conversations with, tell me about the time that you failed so miserably you thought there was no coming back.
Oh, so I have to pick one? No, just kidding.
That's a common refrain. It's common. Many, many guests say that. Yeah, no, pick one.
Yeah. Well, and it's the reason I appreciate you, what you're doing here with your podcast is because it's so easy to look at social media and just think everybody's got it all figured out. And maybe I don't, if you're the viewer of that. And it's just not true. There's the grass is not greener all the time. And so yeah, if I had to pick one, I think I would go back to 2000, I'm going to call it 2009. A lot of people may remember 2008, 2009, 2010. And what had happened, I had worked as a business broker for a firm for 9 years. And I was the top agent, and seemed like an obvious conclusion that I would venture out on my own. And what I did was bought a portion of the company that I worked for. And so that included an SBA loan and some other, significant financial commitments. I brought on a bunch of staff, office, so on and so forth. And I was just chugging right along. And what was happening all around me was, if you remember 2008 and 2009, just huge problems economically and lending issues and all kinds of things. So I was a little isolated because I was in a smaller community and I had a good niche, but I got the tail end of it. And so what was happening, for those that don't know, as a business broker, I help people buy, sell, and finance businesses. And that can, those deals can take 3, 6 months, 12 months or longer. And so here I am with a brand new SBA loan, and I'm on my own, and I've got boxes of paperwork for files, and literally some of these businesses that I had under contract to sell were gone, out of business before we even closed. And so I went into significant debt to keep afloat and had to modify my SBA loan to keep my head above water. And so it was definitely that time like you describe. And I guess I'll add to that I was also going through a difficult marital, divorce. It was difficult emotionally. It wasn't a huge financial challenge, but you put all that together and it felt like the perfect storm. And my way of thinking, to your point, was, man, life's over. I don't know what this means now, but I couldn't even begin to figure out what was next.
So obviously you did. What was that catalyst? Where did you finally figure out, like, okay, you know what? I got to do something. What'd you do?
Yeah. Well, one thing I did, and again, I just want to preface this with right or wrong, right? Because again, it's what I did, and it turned out where it got me to the other side. But if I had to do it over again, I might do it different. So that's the reason I preface that. But one of the things I did, I had 8 agents I was responsible to them. I was their designated broker, and they worked for me. But I had been the top producing agent in my firm for years. And a lot of these people were coming in or not sure they were going to make it, or they were difficult performers at the time. And I literally said, listen, I care about you, and there'll be no business if I don't get to what I know how to do, which is to put deals together. And so I took the majority of my focus away from trying to run my business and focused on being the sole provider of that firm. And I did one deal and got it done, and then another one, and then another one. And then, and before it, I was able to crawl my way out of that dynamic. But by the time it was all done, I think I had, if I think back, probably 3 agents out of the 8 left. And they were successful in their own right before that. But then you take the economic circumstances that took me as a top producer from barely making it. I mean, they weren't going to make it. And so from that perspective, I think it was the right decision. Difficult piece was that just, less than a year before that, we all joined, and here's our new firm and new offices and all this great stuff. And we had big vision, and it crumbled very quickly.
How do you stay positive? How do you stay positive when all of that is happening? You're losing people. It's like you may not make it. You got to focus on just literally doing the day-to-day rather than actually building a business. How do you keep that mindset, that belief that you're going to make it?
I didn't know for sure I was, frankly, but the way that I worked on it every day, I have a tendency, and it may be similar for everybody, but I have a tendency to focus on the worst case scenario. Well, if I spend too much time focusing on that, more than likely I'm going to drive right into that, right? The old saying, you look at the wall when you're trying to avoid an accident, you hit the wall. So I continued to try to sweep up the messes that needed to be dealt with. And as quick as I possibly could, I leaned into what my strength was, and also what I enjoy, which is just helping people buy, sell, and finance businesses. And so I every day would focus on the things I could control and try to let go of the things I couldn't, and just do the best job I could. And there's not much else you can do, I don't think.
You have to keep going, right?
Yeah.
So, talk to me about when you say, you focus on sort of your strengths and you knew what you were good at. When did you learn that about yourself? And how did you sort of focus in on, okay, I can go back to that. That can always be my rock?
Yeah, it's such a great question. So I learned it with lots of reps. And so what that looked like for me is I had, 9 years in this industry. It's hard to believe that was 28 years ago now, but in total, but I was 9 years in. And so I had enough reps to be like, yes, here's what I know how to do. The thing I didn't do was lean into something brand new or try to reinvent the wheel. I just went back to what I knew worked. And I think that's the answer to the question you're asking, which was, core competency, or some people call it their superpower or whatever. I wasn't exploring. I just went back to what worked. And I'd be curious to know from you if that's a common trait, because sometimes you need to let go of. But fortunately, in my case, I just stripped away everything else that was distraction or there was a test, and just did what I knew how to do and crawled my way out. So.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think a lot of folks that I've interviewed in this regard say something similar, which is start small, right? Don't think about the problem as this huge issue. It's focus on small, first steps, right? And for you, it was just get that first deal, then just get that next one. But you're also managing a team. So how do you keep their spirits up, right? When it really looks hopeless for them, because obviously they weren't the top producers. So already they were working from a diminished position. How did you then coach them and sort of support them to keep going as well?
Yeah. And I'll add to this that as I mentioned, I think I partner in deals as well. And so at the time, it wasn't just the brokerage firm. I had 3 or 4 other businesses as well that were all, pretty much everybody was doing poorly at that time. So to answer your question, I saw myself as needing to be the leader. And part of the leader meant just, cleaning up my act before I came into the office. So if I'm woe is me and poor me and all whatever, I had to leave it at the door. And when I got into the office, it's like, here's what we're doing today and here's what we're getting after. And that was the way I led, was we are on purpose. We're not by accident. And here's what we're doing today. So that's what we did day in and day out. And it again got us through.
How do you maintain that identity when maybe it can sometimes feel like imposter syndrome, that it's, I have to behave this way, but the reality is much worse?
I tend to be transparent, but I also have a tendency to, once I do believe what I say. And so it's not uncommon for me to share with my staff with some of the other stuff we've struggled with, my team, just like, listen, here's what's going on. We weren't planning on it. It's not what we asked for. It's where we are. Here's what I'm worried about. Here's what I'm doing about it. And let's get after it. So there's a time where I'm not wanting to be the imposter, because that doesn't feel great. And here's what we're up to. And then I start charging, and hopefully they feel this motivation to start following.
Yeah, because otherwise it's a real problem if you're all by yourself, right? So,
right,
Matt, you're based out in Arizona. Let's talk about you. So tell us about your career, how you got to where you are, and what you're up to now.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was 17 years old, I started a small business, janitorial business, because that was all I knew. And, because I had worked in that industry as a high school student, working third shift, and come from humble means, so to speak. And so I built that business up to 40 employees over 9 years, and then sold it. And there's more to that story. But anyway, selling that opened my eyes to this whole industry of being able to buy and sell businesses. Because the person that bought my business, here I was 26 years old, he was a corporate executive who left his W-2 career to buy my cleaning business. And he had 5 kids, and the day after closing, he's supporting his family and he's doing great. So It really struck something in me. Yeah.
Okay. And so you went into business brokerage from there?
Yeah. So then I tried to figure out what it was I wanted to do for a few months after I sold it, but business brokerage kept coming back to me because I saw an opportunity. So I joined a firm. I was with them for 9 years. They had about 25 agents, and I was their top agent for 7 out of 9 of those years. And so then we kind of created a division for me that I paid for, but I was able to still continue to work with them, with their firm. So we had a good collaborative relationship. So for 28 years now, coming up on 29, I've been helping people buy, sell, and finance businesses. And about 20 years ago, I decided to, instead of investing in the stock market solely, I decided to start investing in what I knew, which was, we'll call them small Main Street businesses. So when a buyer would come to me and need some help one way or another, if it made sense from a relationship standpoint, I'd participate in that purchase. And so, with that, over, 20 years, I've owned 40 businesses. I still have an ownership interest in a little over 20, and varying industries from, everything you can imagine: health and fitness, insurance, private money lending, commercial real estate, residential real estate, parking lot sweeping, property maintenance, just all very, very diverse. So I have a diverse portfolio of holdings of businesses that I can drive by, and I can pick up a phone and call the person who's running it and talk to them about how things are going. So a couple of years ago, I started a company called Amped Success. And Amped Success is a company where I'm taking what I learned through being a broker for so many years with 800 deals that I've facilitated, and teaching people how to go about that on their own or with a broker. But there's such a gap of knowledge about how to buy a business and or prepare a business for sale, let alone obtain financing and partner and all of those things, that it's really what I love. I've been living it for more than half of my life, and that's what Amped Success is now and what brings us together.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, this is my profession is I'm a tax attorney. And so this is certainly something that we collaborate on regardless. I wonder, because in my profession now, there is a rash of people on social media selling tax planning and estates, your trusts, all this nonsense that they really have no business even touching, let alone selling. But I see the same thing in terms of own your own business, right? So the guy that bought your cleaning business, right? Guy leaves his W-2, buys a business. Oh my God, everything's great. I feel like this is so sensationalized now on social media. People get the idea that it's easy. Oh, I just go into a dry cleaner, offer them a seller's note, and they'll just give me the business. Talk me through the actual mechanics. Like give our listeners like the real story on how many businesses they're going to have to go through, how many they're going to lose, and how frustrating this process can be. Because something that we talk about all the time in the show is time is undefeated. If you don't give up, you're probably going to be successful. But it's so hard in our business because buying and selling a business, it's not so easy. It's not as easy as social media makes it out. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is part of the reason I love your podcast, because again, social media, makes it seem like it's just so easy. And here's all you have to do. And it's what motivated me to start Amp Success, is because the reality of buying a business is it's way safer than starting one. And when you buy somebody's recipe and they've got a proven history of success, the odds are you'll do great. And it doesn't, like you said, you don't just walk in and say, hey, how about a seller carryback note and off we go. And so some of the things that I've seen can happen are either like some of my partnerships, they start out great. And then something shows up in the business that requires a deviation from the original recipe. And for people who aren't used to thinking like a business person or are more accustomed to thinking like a W-2 worker, it doesn't mean it can't be done. It's just a different mindset. So from an operational standpoint, I think there's aspects of owning a business that are different than what a lot of people are accustomed to. But the structure piece is where I see the biggest challenge. So I have people, I've got coaching clients who I'm helping with this, but I also get phone calls from people who are asking me to help them get out of their problem. And one recently, she had bought the business 6 months previous and was already in default on her SBA loan and was at risk of losing her home. And what that tells me is that the business must have been priced appropriately because it got approved for financing and would have been appraised as part of that. So the foundation was probably okay. But what was not okay is the owner was the key person. And this woman, unfortunately, didn't know to look at this consequence of that. And so the revenue dropped off the cliff as soon as she bought it because the owner was no longer there and she was providing a personal service. So anyway, that's just one example, but there's lots of other examples. I've got people who contact me where they went under contract on a $5 million car wash because they saw something about that on social media and they don't even have the down payment funds. And for your listeners, that can turn into losing earnest money if you're not careful. And so it's just, there's a way to go about it with proper planning and understanding objectives and core competencies and proximity, that just make it, can be, phenomenal. I've helped lots of people become multimillionaires through this process of buying businesses, but I've also seen people suffer devastating losses.
Yeah. And so talk to me about this trend that I see on social media all the time, that but it's zero money down. You don't have to come up with any cash to buy this business. I feel like this is such a myth and really happens in 0.01% of deals. But what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, there is a way it can be done, but it's super unique. And I think it needs to be done carefully because oftentimes the zero down means that if the person has no money of their own, then that turns into a whole new issue, which is operating capital and post-closing liquidity and all of the things that are necessary for ongoing success. So no, I don't think that's a wise plan. And I think the reality of it is that when somebody evaluates a business that meets their financial income requirements and is within their budget as far as their liquidity to purchase, with a reasonable amount down, which for an SBA loan, that's going to be bare minimum 10%. I usually tell people 12 to 15% down, but having post-closing liquidity, you can look at the math, and especially somebody like you, Nick, you can evaluate it and say, yeah, based on what the business has done, it can afford to pay for itself, which means cover its debt and pay you as the new owner and have money left over for a rainy day. And what we do, and I know you do, is, if I look at 3 years history of a business and I plug my new debt in as a buyer and my living expense requirement in there, and I see that I would have been fine over the past 3 years, well, then the question becomes, can I run the business like the previous owner did for the past 3 years? And is there any economic influence that might just torpedo the industry or something? But otherwise, the odds are with us, right, as buyers. And so really that's kind of the process. It just becomes a matter of designing the deal where it makes sense. But this idea of no money down or a seller carryback, which I'd love to talk about that if you want, but those don't happen.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Social media makes it feel like that's how all these deals are done. Almost every business is sold with no cash transacting. The seller happily will carry a note and watch you struggle in the business and hope for their payments.
And take it back, yeah.
This seems far-fetched, but talk to me about your perspective, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a fundamental component of buying a business, right? And when I'm evaluating a business, businesses are going to sell for a multiple of their discretionary earnings, right? So let's just say we're looking at a deal. You and I, Nick, we're going to buy this business and it generates $300,000 a year in discretionary earnings. That means the owner is accustomed to benefiting financially about $300,000 a year. And we're going to pay, let's say we're going to pay $1 million for it, right? Well, why would a seller give up their $300,000 a year in income to give you and I their business with no money down and the hopes that we're going to run it better than they did and pay them?
Right.
So the deals that I see where people are willing to carry back a note, where a seller is willing to be your lender, that's what carry back a note means for anybody that might not know, where they're willing to be your lender, it's typically because the business isn't working, or they just simply want to take it back when you fail. But most of the sellers I'm working with that have successful businesses that, in my opinion, are worth buying, they want their cash to go do something else. That's why they're selling. Otherwise, they just keep running it.
Right. They're not selling the business to watch someone else run it, right? They're selling the business to get out and do anything else. So, yeah. Right. And again, how do you get the word out then? How do we combat the noise? Because these people are very popular and they have a huge following. I get sent these by clients, right? Saying, hey, look, we can do this. We cannot do this, right? How do we get ourselves to be louder than the noise?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm working on through AMP Success. And I know you and I are talking about, trying to come up with an arrangement where we can collaborate on being louder than the misinformation. And it's funny when I say the word misinformation, that it might be easy for people to just think, oh, it's whatever. I'm talking to people about losing their homes because they didn't do this right. And that's the passion that I bring to the topic, that is just can actually make me angry when I hear somebody just pumping people with ideas about how, no, all you do, you just buy it. Anyway, you wouldn't believe the calls I get from people that want to buy businesses that I have for sale that have they ought to thank me for not letting them buy it.
Yeah. It's similar in the tax world, right? I'm dealing with people right now who set up these charitable organizations without really any compliance, and they've been treating it like a piggy bank because someone told them they could do that. It's crazy, right? Because the consequences of playing with the stuff we're talking about is jail or complete financial failure. For me, the risks just seem outrageous. How have you seen people misunderstand the risks in buying a business?
Well, there's lots of them, but I'm gonna hone in on just one, which again, I think you would be speaking the exact same language, but it's financial feasibility. So most people don't start by looking at a business. They look at the business based on the industry that they heard on social media was a hot industry. Well, you can take a hot industry in a town with 10 other competitors and it's a horrible industry. Or you can take a horrible industry and put it in a town where there's nobody else, and it's a great business, right? So the industry alone should not be the key. The key should be financial feasibility. Can you evaluate the business historically and demonstrate that it can afford to pay for itself and support you during a bad year and still be okay? And if that's the case, man, you're so much closer to getting what you wanted as a business buyer than just trying to find an HVAC company, a car wash, or a laundromat. That's the ticket.
Well said. Yeah, well said. So, I want to go back before we sort of wrap up to sort of your start, because, obviously selling a business is amazing. And yes, this group knew you, but, you're a 26-year-old kid. You don't really have, a pedigree. How did you convince these folks that, look, I can do this, right? Let me be this broker. I know that I've only ever ran a janitorial business, but never mind that. I sold my business. And so because I think some people, certainly probably some of our listeners, sell themselves short. Right? They think, I'm not even going to apply for that job because there's no way they'd give it to me. What gave you that sense of, what, this is what I want to do. I'm going to convince these guys. How'd you come up with that mindset, and then how'd you make it happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. And some of that is what I'm just going to call either entrepreneurial or genetic tenacity. And so, yes, I was a very young man going to meet with people making far more than I ever dreamed of, and telling them that I could help them sell their business. But I meant it. I got the education I needed to be able to do it. I literally, when I started, I would go and talk with 6, 7, or 8 prospective new business sellers a day. So I was getting more reps in than most people get in a month because I was serious about it. And when I didn't know something, I asked questions. I reached out to people like you, Nick, in the accounting world. Like, can you help me understand this tax return? And so I did the work I needed to do to become an expert. And then the reps are just so hard to beat, and I know you have lots and lots of reps. What comes with reps is experience, and the experience is something that can't be learned from AI, and it can't be learned from a book. It comes from beating the streets. And so I beat the streets a lot. I worked real hard and still do. And, when some people hear, 800 transactions that I've helped facilitate, that's a lot of reps. And so, even though I'm still younger than a lot of my clients, even at my advanced age of 55, I've earned it. I know more about I'm sorry?
55 is the new 40. But no, I keep
right. Right. Well, after the conversion rate and all of that, right? So anyway, I think if you're going to sink yourself into something, you do it with everything you've got. And even though people may doubt you, the tenacity and the horsepower that we as individuals, when we're passionate about something, can bring to the table is what gets people's attention. And that's what I used as a 26-year-old trying to beat into this industry.
Phenomenal story. This has been an amazing conversation. The last question we always ask actually comes from the previous guest. So my previous guest asks, what are you scared of and why haven't you tried it?
Oh, that's a powerful question. What am I scared of and why have I not tried it? I tend to be, and I'll be generic a little bit, but I tend to be afraid of letting go of stuff that doesn't serve me anymore. And Nick, you and you've been a great coach for me about bandwidth and like how you can help me, manage all of the busyness I've created. Well, part of that is because I haven't let go of stuff that isn't serving me anymore. I've become more of a collector as opposed to, something else. And so so for me, I'm afraid of letting go of something for what that might mean or what I might lose or whatever, as opposed to grabbing a hold of where I want to go. And I just want to point out to your listeners something, I appreciate our friendship and relationship so much. And one of the questions you asked me before we started was one that I had never been asked before, which is if I could provide you with a list of the things that I don't want to do anymore. And the God's honest truth is I have never thought of it. I mean, I might think of one a day or something like, I wish I weren't doing this. But to put that down on paper is a very powerful exercise. And especially for somebody like me who just keeps collecting and getting busier and busier and busier all the time. And at some point, like you said, there's only so much time. So,
and it's something that if we were talking about, right? It's what my firm does for my clients, right? As this is something I regularly ask is give me a list of all the stuff that you are doing that you should not be doing. It is not the best and highest use of your time. Let me and my team take that over for you, right? That's the sort of the promise of my firm, just to sort of give a plug on my podcast for my other business. But the last question, the absolutely last question here is, tell me, the word resiliency, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, resiliency. What it means to me is being willing to get knocked on my ass, if that word's okay on your podcast, and being willing to get up. That's resiliency.
Time and time again. Matt Uhler, thank you so much for joining us on the Resiliency Project podcast. Guys, I think today we learned, again, time is undefeated. Keep going, keep trying, get the reps in, and you will succeed. Until next time, this has been the Resiliency Project.